Hey, hello.
Hey,
Hey, what's up, buddy?
sorry, how this works. Have I got my thing just on audio?
Yeah, I only need audio. I don't need video. It's fine.
Oh, cool. Hey, sorry. I've only used Skype once, so I'm not used to it.
Yeah, no problem.
Anyway, thanks for talking to me.
Just make sure you
Um,
speak into the microphone and everything should be fine.
is it loud now?
No, everything sounds fine. It sounds good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I guess I just wanted to ask you about because I've been listening to your streams and um, I wanted to know what you think about the bad side of left-wing politics, because I agree with a lot of what you say, but I guess for me, I try to do a sort of devil's advocate thing and in order to sort of, I don't know, for people who are critical of it to understand how to counter those arguments, if that makes sense. Yeah.
So I guess it would kind of depend on where exactly so when you talk about the left or SJWs, there's kind of a lot of topics. So I guess it would depend. Could you, if it's possible, could you narrow it down maybe a little bit more specifically in regards to one singular topic? I can give, I guess, criticisms of.
Yeah, I've literally written a list. The reason I was so disorganized was because when I came home, there was all this chaos, and I was like, I've been looking forward to talking to you, and I'd been waiting. I took an extra hour off
Okay.
because I didn't know we were going to call, so I was like, oh, this is so frustrating. So that's why I'm a bit disorganized. But yeah, I was going to ask you about the whole globalization thing. I don't know whether that's a conspiracy or because that's something that I don't understand, because it has a lot to do with economics and corporate elite people and stuff like that. And you seem to understand. I'm not very good with economics, but I understand psychology and sociology and all that stuff, but I don't understand the way wealth is spread out throughout the world, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So I think that's one of the theories that's been going around on the far right about this idea that a very wealthy few, it's in their interest to have a whole lot of immigration and people, literally globalization. So everyone they're being their one sort of big country rather than separate nations and all that stuff. And yeah, I don't know. I don't really understand that thing.
Sure. I think, so in general, I know that a lot of people say a lot of different things. I think globalization just kind of refers to the concept that we all kind of live in an interconnected global economy, and that's kind of an undeniable reality of the world today, right? That when you buy things at stores, oftentimes they're manufactured in other countries. Sometimes the engineers that design these products are from other countries. The material is going to be imported from countries that it's not even manufactured in. That globalization just kind of refers to the fact that we have this kind of global economy today. And it seems that most people, I think most reasonable people, understand that you need to integrate with that economy as much as possible. So people try to do that via maybe a system kind of like the EU or different types of trade agreements or whatnot is kind of...
Yeah, and it's you can't really avoid it anyway. So
yeah, absolutely, you can't. No, and that's one of the big problems with the right leaning dudes is this idea that you can quote unquote avoid globalization is really stupid. It's not founded in reality at all. It just doesn't make any sense. Yeah, and there is there's no economist, even right leaning ones, aren't going to sit here and tell you that oh yeah, we need to move away from a globalized economy. It just doesn't make any sense. There's not really any way. It's not even wrong. It's just stupid to argue that.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking as well. But because I think so much of this stuff is I think most people aren't horrible people. I think that they're just maybe misinformed. So they get information and then they sort of don't realize that in fact they're shooting themselves in the foot, with the whole healthcare thing as well. Because in Australia, even in Australia, and we've got a conservative government, which is ironically called the Liberal government, by the way. They call themselves a Liberal government. Our left-wing sort of party is called Labour, which is strange. But anyway, even they sort of believe in having a basic healthcare for all people.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody has Medicare, but some people can have extra insurance, like for people who have disabilities and stuff like that. So you pay. So there is a market for insurance. So it's sort of a two-tier system.
That's pretty common. You've got like your social welfare net, and then you've got a higher tier for people that have the money to afford it. Sure.
Yeah. So I guess I find it really amazing when I see people sort of saying, "Oh, that's so socialist." I'm like, well, our country isn't particularly socialist. Like, and a lot of developed countries are, like the Scandinavian countries. They sort of lean more socialist, I guess, in the sense that they have high taxes, but they're some of the most progressive countries on earth. Do you know what I mean? Like they're doing pretty well considering.
Yeah, I don't. Socialist kind of has like a very particular meaning in terms of like socialism or the government. I guess you can talk about like socialized programs. I try to stay away from using that word, especially on the internet, just because socialism carries with it so many different connotations and technical meanings that. But yeah, I kind of know what you mean. But more government intervention for things like healthcare and whatnot.
Oh yeah, I don't think like that's sort of what I was saying. Like I don't think that it is like literal socialism, but a lot of people interpret it that way. Just anything to do with higher taxes means socialism. So I'm like, that's a bit of a jump. Like, how did that sort of come? It sort of reminds me of the whole cultural Marxism sort of conspiracy theory that's going on.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, until the last 2 years, I didn't even hear that word really used that much. Like, I just heard about it in history books and stuff like that. So, I don't know. It seems to have taken on a huge new meaning or something. But, yeah, like, I agree with you. Like, I think it's way too black and white, the way people are thinking about different forms of politics. And what you said about, like, the horseshoe theory, I can't remember where I saw that, but that's so true. Like, the two extremes are as bad as each other. Or, like, if you sort of take them to their extreme, they will be, if that makes sense. Like, it always ends in the same sort of misuse of the theory.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah.
But yeah, like I was also going to ask because I keep hearing about on not university, I should say college in America. On college campuses, there's this huge like push for political correctness and all this stuff. And like I was at uni like a couple of years ago, and I didn't get that vibe. Like maybe it was because I was doing like audio engineering and stuff like that. But I don't know. I just don't relate to what. Like I'm interested to know what people actually mean by that. Is it because everyone's very pedantic about what language they use and?
So these kinds of topics, unfortunately, you have to get very, very nuanced because nobody usually presents it in an accurate way online. The problem, so there are people on the right that would lead you to believe that every single college campus is turning into these like bastions of super PC culture where everybody has trigger warnings, and if you hurt anybody's feelings, you're going to go to jail or whatever. There are a select few colleges in the United States that are pretty stupid with some weird things that are going on, but for the most part these are usually pretty small schools that nobody really gives a fuck about. That it's not like every college campus and all across the United States is like having these huge anti-white protests or whatever. Like college kids tend to be more liberal for a variety of reasons, and there are some college campuses that have some dumb things going on, but I think in general I don't think that there's like a massive like ultra PC cultural Marxism problem going on in schools. There are some I think that there are some worrying trends in colleges. It does seem that we don't like to challenge ideas very much, especially right-leaning ones in schools. But it's nowhere near as bad as some right-leaning people, at least in America or Canada, would have you think it is. Or Europe, I guess, or United Kingdom, I should say.
Yeah, like, that was the impression. I feel like a lot of the stuff that they're sort of pushing are very unusual examples, like, and blowing them out of proportion, which I mean, that's just the impression I got because, I mean, I've had a few experiences where, like in my own personal life, where someone sort of called me out and said, you're being racist or racist or something, and which I found sort of funny because, like, I'm the other way. Like, I'm very, like, pro-human rights and I really feel passionately about this stuff. And so I sort of had a bit of a taste of what it's like when you unintentionally say something that you're, you know, you didn't mean it that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I can sort of see, like, I've tried to understand where these people are coming from. I don't know whether there's any point to doing that, but for me, that's what I've been trying to do because there is a huge backlash. Like, you can't really deny it. Like, it's even happened in Australia. And, like, a lot of what happens in America politically comes back to Australia, I guess.
Yeah,
so,
in most of the Western world, right? If crazy things are going on in Europe, it probably impacts you. Maybe America more so than most, just because we're probably the loudest country. But everybody's politics, to some extent, especially when you talk about things like ISIS or immigration in general, are all pretty interconnected today. I would say, or at least it seems to be.
Yeah. I mean, I understand how people operate. They see the news, they think, oh, there's a whole lot of terrorism. We've got to protect our country, and if they don't sort of read into it and actually find out the actual extent and the proportions of it and all that stuff that they might get. I guess I'm just trying to find the best in people because I'm really shocked at the degree of hatred that's sort of happened in the last 3 years. Like, I'm really...
Well, like, so, I mean, I can probably explain that pretty well. Like, degree of hatred for what? What in particular?
Marginalized groups and immigration and refugees and women and gay people. Like, it's almost like it's gone backwards or something.
Sure.
I don't know.
So there's an intersection of a lot of different issues that are going on here. Insofar as immigration is concerned, I think a lot of the immigration stuff, it's so complicated. There's so many different issues. So look at one issue: terrorism. Terrorism is a very difficult thing for individuals to understand, right? Psychologically speaking, we have a lot of cognitive biases that kind of work against us insofar as how we as humans interpret information today, when we have access to so much information, you know? So, like, if there are like 3 or 4 terrorist attacks reported across Europe in a month, you get people like Sargon of Akkad or any right-leaning commentator online literally saying things like all of Europe is under attack, like all of Europe is being bombed, all of Europe is, and it's like, dude, like, Europe is like a continent of over 1.5 billion people. I don't know, it's a lot of fucking people, you know, like, you know, 2 or 3 terrorist attacks, you know, even in a month that are affecting 1 or 2 people. Like, these are not major issues. The entire country is not falling apart. Like, these are being dramatically overblown. But if you're trying to sculpt a certain narrative, I mean, with places this fucking huge, I mean, it's pretty easy to find the stories that you're looking for, you know? So like, it's really easy to craft. Hold on, I need to double check this. What is the population continent of Europe? Oh, holy shit, it's only 740 million. Sorry, I said 1.5 million. All right, but still, 740 million people. Damn, you guys don't have anybody over there. Like, it's really easy to, like, cherry-pick stories. I don't know if you ever heard, but somebody was trying to put together, like, a map of refugee crimes or whatever, or immigrant crime in fucking Germany, and they were, like, going through and picking out, like stove fires and shit, and they were calling them, like, arsons and whatnot to make it look like refugees were setting shit on fire all over Germany, when, like, all of the stories that were being posted were literally, like, somebody, you know, a stove caught on fire or some shit, and it wasn't even like a reported crime. Like, it was just like a, you know, like a reported thing that it just happened, you know?
Yeah, and coming from a family, myself personally, that, like, there are quite a few conservative people in my family, I actually hear them, and they're very intelligent people, but they really believe this stuff. Like, they really think that people are invading and they're going to, you know, destroy our families. And, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is the propaganda sort of works. Like, the only reason I know that that's not true is because I read so much about it, and I probably spend an inordinate amount of time doing that.
Sure.
Which is, you know, like, it kind of bothers me, like, how easy it is to manipulate people, like, in the media and stuff.
Yeah, so this is a big. There's a lot to be read about this. All these topics are so complicated. You could speak about any of them for like hours and hours. So if I don't do anything justice, I'm sorry. I read some interesting things about how, like, I guess in Soviet Russia, this was like a very common propaganda tactic. Is that the idea is that if you can make every single news source seem uncredible, then every single news source becomes equally credible. So when somebody looks at like like InfoWars, does that mean anything to you? Yeah, so people like Alex Jones or Paul Joseph Watson, when you look at these kinds of quote-unquote news organizations like Breitbart, like you can look at that and you go, okay, well, like this is literally fake news. Like this is tabloid level, no original reporting, like blog spam bullshit. Like, and a lot of it is just factually wrong, And people will look at that, but then they'll also go, okay, well, what about that one story that CNN had where maybe it wasn't all 100% true? See, they're fake news too. So CNN is the same as this, right? This idea that you try to make it so that every single news source is equally uncredible makes it so that every idea all of a sudden becomes, permissible. Everything becomes equally likely, The chance that somebody in Trump's political cabinet colluded with somebody at Russia is the same level of likeliness that Hillary Clinton had Seth Rich assassinated, or that Pizzagate is real and that Podesta and everybody are raping children in the basement of a pizza parlor that doesn't even have a basement. Like, that's like a really worrying trend. That's a really scary thing, that people's inability to evaluate the credibility of news sources is very, very, very worrying.
Yeah, like I saw the Pizzagate thing and I was like, oh my God. Like, I feel like that's something they should teach kids in school, like about how you can take a whole lot of facts and put them together and then make this whole story out of it. And it sort of seems credible to a point, but there might be one or two wrong connections. And then it becomes this whole, like, and that's why you've got to be so careful. You've got to investigate every bit of information.
Yeah, so like what you just said there is funny, because what you just said there would get people screaming at you for being a Nazi that's trying to censor information. Making a class for people to critically evaluate information sounds to me like you're trying to cover up for the Democrats. Sounds to me like you're trying to cover up for liberal crime, right? That's what people would say, is that you're just trying to get rid of the real news. You're trying to cover it up with fake news when you do something like that.
Yeah, I mean, the fake news thing is very brilliant. I mean, the minute you just say all news sources are fake, it's a very strategic thing to be doing. I mean, how can they win now? I mean, obviously, every single news source is going to have people who are biased or making mistakes sometimes. But if you just smear the whole mainstream media, it's a way of controlling the whole population.
Yep.
And I can see that that's what's happening. I mean, I think some woman actually left CNN and
oh god, yeah, that Trump News Network shit. Literal state fucking media. How ironic is that in the United States of America?
I know. I saw that today and I was like, oh my, that's like a fascist country.
Yeah, that kind of stuff should make anybody worried. The problem is that in the United States, and I'm sure it's like this probably in most places in the world, but I don't know the ins and outs of the political systems, and nowhere near as well as they do in the United States. In the United States, we are ruthlessly partisan. Very, very, very partisan. So your party allegiance is like fucking everything. It's literally like, I don't know, if you play World of Warcraft, isn't it like Horde and Alliance? Like one of those things? Like, I don't know, like whatever you're part of, like your party is like the most important group ever, and you will always excuse crimes that your own party does, and you will always attack the opposition for like every little thing they do. So we're having this really weird issue going on in the United States where we need Republicans to step up and call out Trump on some of the ridiculous shit that he's doing, but they won't do it because nobody wants to turn against their party.
Well, I get the impression that the conservative party in America is very divided in general, from what I can see. Like, I might be wrong here, but I got the impression that a lot of them don't like Trump, but they sort of back him because that means they have more power and
that's the problem. Is that they'll drop Trump when it becomes politically expedient to do so, but until then, nobody, like, it's very rare to get Republicans. Like, we're fighting, like, we've got, like, 3 or 4 Republicans that aren't voting along, like, me. Like, when we talk about, like, that healthcare shit in the United States, like, that isn't going through, these votes are very, very close. These votes are 48-52 with, like, 3 Republican senators flipping. Like, it's not like we're getting these massive victories for America. We're getting, like, 2 or 3 Republican senators that are flipping their vote, and all the other 48 of them are all going along, 48, 49 of them are just going along with the normal vote.
So what did you think about what McCain did? Did you think that was a good thing, or was
I don't like McCain. I think McCain is a spineless fuck. But I mean, he voted the way that he should have. I don't know. Maybe his impending demise is like making him reflect on life choices or something. I don't know how much you know about McCain, but McCain is like the guy that has gotten up so many times and has said like, this is wrong, this is horrible, this is bad. But then he always votes along with the party every time. One of the things that was so shocking about what just happened was that like, this is one of the first time McCain has like actually bucked the party line here and actually voted along with what he said he was going to do. So that was like really, really, really shocking to a lot of people.
Yeah, I absolutely know nothing except that he was a very arch Republican person. So when I saw that, it was like I had no backstory, and I was trying to work out what his motivation was, whether it was strategic. It just seemed like he was, I don't know, maybe it is, you're right, because he's sick and he's maybe got a bit more compassion or something. I don't know, but it's hard to tell with politicians because it seems to me that everything they do seems to have an ulterior motive or something. And well, I can see what...
It's typically for re-election. It doesn't even have to be more complicated than that. But it's typically people want to do what they need to do to get elected again. It's not even more complicated than that. It's usually how it goes.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I wanted to ask you was because I think you said that you used to be very conservative, and I was just wondering, like, what made you change your mind about that stuff? Like, if there was anything in particular, like...
So the biggest thing the problem that I have is that I think that a lot of liberals are way too optimistic. So I would say something like like the way that I would usually say this is I think that market forces are very real, and I think that market forces need to be respected. Any type of economic policy you make needs to respect market forces and has to be rooted in the reality of the markets. So I'm generally against things like a $15 an hour minimum wage across the United States. I know that sounds really low to you, but in Australia, because your guys' dollar amount is high as fuck for everything, but that would be like a doubling of the minimum wage in the United States. It's absurdly high here. And it seems like a lot of liberals push for types of economic policy that aren't very feasible. I hear a lot of liberals, Bernie Sanders is advocating for like single payer healthcare, which sounds like a good idea, but holy shit, if you want single payer to work in the United States, you're going to need a lot of financial reform of the medical industries, because we can't just raise taxes to cover it at current cost, because we pay so much for healthcare in the U.S. There's no way that you're going to come up with the money to make that work. It just won't happen. And a lot of liberals seem to not accept that or acknowledge that, or they think that they can bump taxes up on businesses to like 80% or 70% or 60%, and magically they're going to cough up the money instead of moving to another country. Like I think that that's a big problem that a lot of left-leaning people have. I'm still pretty like economically conservative, but I recognize that a lot of life is unfair and really fucked up. So I would want as much as possible to account for that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, and this is something I don't have much like knowledge about, which is economics. So, and I actually want to study it because I feel like that's the key to a lot of this stuff. But I did see the other day WikiLeaks. I don't know whether you're a fan of them after what they did, but I was very pro WikiLeaks for about 5 years. I had no issues with him releasing the emails. I was more concerned about what was motivating the fact that he did.
So the information he releases is generally true and probably important, but he's 100%. Assange is a tool of Putin, like 100%. WikiLeaks is 100% like an arm of like the Russian media machine. The information they release is still good, but I mean, it's very, very, very one-sided. I think it's really important to keep in mind, and a lot of people keep saying that like, well, we got transparency. It's not transparency if it only comes from one side. And Assange is specifically quoted as saying that they had information on Trump that they didn't want to release for some random bullshit reason. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of WikiLeaks. I mean, I guess the leaks are real. I mean, and the information can be valuable, but
do you think that's because he's got an agenda about getting out of his situation? Maybe.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure Assange fucking hated.
Sorry about that.
Oh shit. I'm pretty sure that Assange fucking hated Hillary Clinton, and I think he hates the United States, but I know that he fucking hates the fuck out of Hillary Clinton, so it probably made him really happy to do anything he could to be a thorn in his side, but yeah, I don't know. I think that Assange just generally has like an I don't want to say anti-American, but at least for the purposes of the election, was very pro-Trump, very anti-Hillary, very anti-Obama administration, which, by extension is the Hillary State Department, so.
Yeah, well, before all that happened, I had a lot of respect ideologically for what they were trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw their tweets, and I was like, it's almost like they're trying to watch the world burn for the fun of it. And like you said, he seems to have a very partisan attitude now, which makes him disappointingly hypocritical. Like,
yeah, and that's a big problem, because like when you look at somebody, and I could be a little naive, I'll admit, in saying this, Snowden might have a tinge of anti-American sentiment, especially because he's hiding in Russia. That's possible, but at least Snowden didn't seem to be partisan. It seemed to me like when Snowden was leaking stuff, he took some time to responsibly leak stuff that had to do with the security information that he thought was being mishandled in the United States, and it seemed to me that was the motivation for doing it. Whereas Assange just really fucking hated the Democrat Party, really fucking doesn't like America, really fucking hated the Obama administration. Like, so it kind of tinges everything that comes out of WikiLeaks, where it's like, okay, well, I guess like their leaks are interesting, but I wonder what it would be like if there was a WikiLeaks for the Republican side of things, you know? Like, how is it that WikiLeaks and Assange have all this information to leak, can fish all of these, the DNC, the Podesta email accounts, all these pieces of information, but we don't have any Trump tax returns. We don't have any information from Trump's businesses. We don't have any information. Like, they just don't care about that. Nobody gives them any of that information. Like, that seems really hard for me to believe, you know?
Absolutely, yeah. And to be honest, I'm sad about it, because I think it could have been a really positive sort of thing. And yeah, like I don't know, like for ages I thought, wow, finally we're having some sort of transparency with governments. That it seems to me, even on, like whether it had been the left or the right, it seems to me when it comes to the military action and foreign policy, it doesn't matter what side of politics you're on. Like, they're going to do the same thing. At least that's the impression I get.
Well, the problem is that foreign policy is really complicated, and to have any opinion whatsoever on foreign policy requires you to do a bit of reading. Like, I would say that like 98% of people, at least in the United States, don't really have any idea what our foreign policy is or what goes on insofar as foreign policy goes. I think, and 98% might even be generous. So I mean, like, it's really hard to get people motivated to vote for people based on foreign policy things when they don't even really know what's going on anywhere in the first place. Why are we involved in the Middle East? Who are the players in the Middle East? You know, where do terrorist groups in the Middle East get their funding from? Why are we allied with countries that fund the same terror groups that we claim to be fighting? Like, all of these questions are like really complicated and require like a decent amount of background digging that I don't think a lot of people, and I don't mean to say this like in a dismissive way, like a lot of people just don't have the time to do this. Like, if you work a normal 9 to 5 or some shit, you know, like I play video games for a living and talk about this shit, so obviously I can spend all day on the internet digging this shit up. But this is really hard for like the average person to try to find this information. Like, you have to spend a fair amount of time digging around and reading shit in places that you're not even comfortable visiting, you know?
Yeah. Well, do you ever think that it's okay, like, for interventions like that? Do you reckon it's ever actually motivated by the right sort of ethical reasons, if that makes sense? Like,
well, so like that's kind of the problem, isn't it? Is that, like, you know, is there a good reason to intervene in a certain country? Like, I'm sure there probably could be. You know, like Saddam Hussein doing what he did to the Kurds and shit in Kuwait and all that. Like, you know, there are probably good reasons to intervene in countries, but the problem is that most of the time the United States is very, 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 very dishonest in what we're doing in the Middle East, right? We're in the Middle East because of our interests there insofar as like Russia and then kind of sort of insofar as like our interests in the Gulf, right? We're not generally there because we genuinely care about like the state of affairs in the Middle East and the people there, right? If we really cared about atrocities and shit like that, you'd see us doing more stuff south of our own border in South America and even in Central and Sub-Saharan Africa and shit. Like, we would be over there doing stuff, but we're not. We're always in the Middle East, right? Because this is the geopolitical hotspot of the world right now. So I mean, is there a good reason to intervene in some countries? Sure, but the United States doesn't intervene for those reasons, and we're definitely not honest about why we're intervening in the countries that we do intervene in.
Yeah, well, when I was reading about Syria, I was like so confused because I don't know how people know who the enemy is, because there are so many different factions and things going on.
Yeah, so it's actually like, maybe I might oversimplify this a little bit. I don't know if Yankees in chat, if you'll get mad at me. Like, Syria is pretty simple. In Syria, you have a bunch of people that don't like Assad, who is the leader guy. You've got a bunch of people that don't like him. They get money funded from Saudi Arabia, okay, and the other Sunni Gulf states, okay? So those guys are like the rebel dudes. Assad is like the leader guy that they don't like, who's also friends with Putin, Russia, So we don't like Assad. The reason why we wanted Syria to fail as a state and to collapse as a state is because we don't like Assad because he's friends with Putin, and we wanted to put somebody in power that wasn't friends with Putin. that's pretty like that's like the very simple like guide to what's going on in Syria. Anything that Obama said about we care about the Syrian people or any of that shit, that was all 100% bullshit. Anything Hillary said, anything Obama said, anybody said, Syria was all about the fact that Putin and Assad are sort of friends with each other. I don't think we give any fucks about anything else besides that.
Yeah, I'm a bit confused about the whole Russian connection with Trump, other than them trying to destabilize the US. Like, I don't understand that.
So we have a thing called NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, I think. Fuck, I think that's it. But basically, we have a bunch of countries that we set up, quote unquote, missile defense installations at. It can also be missile launchers, and we kind of set these up in strategic positions around the world in countries that are allied with us to give us really good kind of leverage, we'll say, over Russia. Syria is really important to Russia because Syria has a port called Tartus, I think, that is one of only, I think, 2 warm water ports that Russia has access to. So that port is actually of extreme strategic importance to Russia. So that's one of the reasons why Syria is kind of important to us and why we would like it if the people in Syria were more friendly towards us and not with Putin. Although there are other memes that go on as well, like there could be a pipeline that could run through Syria that would be a threat to Turkey and Israel, who are also allies to the United States. And it's hard to say how much of that influences things as well, but...
Yeah, I heard about that, and it seems to me that seems to be at the core of a lot of the issue as well. I don't know, but yeah, like the other thing I was going to ask you was, just this is slightly different to like huge geopolitical situations, but with sort of the banter that's going on the internet, that's a nice way of putting it. I've just noticed that a lot of people in positions of power or publicity or whatever seem to be tainted with this Nazi brush. And to give you an example, I think I said to you, someone called Majid Nawaz was put on the SPL, the Southern Poverty Law Center list of potential white supremacists, or some people who are actually spreading Islamophobic propaganda. And I've watched so much about him, and I really don't, like, I can't get my head around the fact that someone would put him on that list. And so I guess I was going to ask you about guilt by association in general. Like,
yeah, generally that's really cancerous thinking. I don't know this particular person, but I know that a lot of that happens where like a certain person will say one thing and all of a sudden there must be a Nazi, or because they don't totally fall in line or completely toe the kind of like left-leaning point of view, that means that they're like literally like espousing like white nationalist sentiment and shit. You can probably find people that would say things like that about, do you know who Sam Harris is?
Yes.
Yeah, so like a lot of people now are saying things like Sam Harris is a race realist, and Sam Harris is actually racist and advocates for genetic differences in IQ because he had Charles Murray on his podcast, and he definitely doesn't. Like if you call like Sam Harris a Nazi or a race realist, like that's pretty dishonest. Make no mistake, I hate Sam Harris, but like those aren't really accurate things that you could levy against him.
Yeah, and I guess that I mean I've seen Sam Harris on heaps of podcasts and videos and stuff, and I can see why people would see that he probably sort of errs on the side of being hypercritical of Islam to the point where it's a little bit irrational, even though he's very intelligent.
Yeah, he's got a huge anti-Islam binge. That's like his like huge thing right now. Yeah. Yeah,
but Majid Nawaz, he used to be an extremist, and now he's actually started an organization to combat extremism on the far right, and that includes white supremacist extremism. So, I don't know, I think that's a good thing. Like, it's not like he chooses sides. He actually tries to de-radicalize a lot of people on all sides of politics, which I think is a really admirable thing. But yeah, I can see why people point out that Sam Harris is a little bit biased, but I guess the whole Nazi thing is going a bit too far. And that's been my main concern about a lot of this issue with putting people in camps, and not camps, but like, I don't know, one side or the other.
Yeah, sure. Some people want to put people in camps, but yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yeah, it's definitely a bad thing. I've actually on my stream I've tried to stop using political labels completely because it seems like they always just lead to more confusion than like anytime you bring up a person's like political label or affiliation, it seems like all you're doing is diluting the conversation because then people are like, well, I might be this label, but I don't believe this thing and I don't believe this thing and I'm not even really this, and it gets like really confusing really quickly if you start doing it.
Yeah, I hate labels, but at the same, like, I'm conflicted about labels. I'm like, well, we sort of need them to sort of communicate, but at the same time, they seem to cause more harm than good.
Yeah, I would even disagree with that. I think at this point, I actually don't think labels are needed at the moment because it seems like they do more harm than good because the parties, at least in the United States, and really around the world probably, at least in France, Germany, and the United Kingdom, it seems like groups of people are very fractured in ideas right now. Like what it means to be right-leaning, especially in America and on the internet is like a very weird thing right now. Like if you're right leaning, does this mean that you're just like, so we've got like the very vanilla, I'm a conservative, so I'm generally in favor of small government. Okay, well, are you a libertarian? Well, kind of, but I'm like also like very religious and I don't like brown people, so I'm anti-immigration and a libertarian at the same time, even though these ideas are contradictory because libertarians should be for open immigration. Or, you know, like, or are you, I'm very right leaning, but I'm also very evangelical, so even though I think the government should be small, I also think that they should make things like drugs or prostitution or abortion or homosexuality illegal, or we should have the right to discriminate against homosexuals or you know whatever, or you know like there's and this is like there's a million different descriptors. Like some alt-right people, you know, like the official alt-right, I'm pretty sure is anti-Semitic. They hate Jewish people. They think the Holocaust is fake, or some of them do, and they think that there needs to be a final solution for the Jewish people because they control all the media. Other people identify as alt-right and they just feel white nationalistic sentiments, but they don't necessarily hate Jewish people. Like it just seems like using the labels is like such a waste of time because there's like a million different types of people that all fall under these labels now, you know?
Yeah, well, I guess, I mean, like I've noticed though with the alt-right, it's just a term that's been coined not just by Richard Spencer, but by people who pick up on the fact that there's a certain, quite a large group of people who might, like you said, have varying views on certain issues, but they tend to have the same views, like say on Islam, women, gay people, trans people, like they tend to have the same views and they won't actually call themselves that, but they kind of fit into that crowd, if that makes sense. Like I know that they're the types of people who wouldn't like be nasty to a person of color or something or a woman, but they have the same sort of attitude. And the strange thing about it is that they don't actually admit to being part of that kind of group, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's like a lot of weird... This gets into really weird territory. So you're talking about, like, say you got a person, okay, and they're not racist. They're definitely not racist. But they also think that, like, white culture should be protected. They think that we can't have too many Mexican babies in the United States because it's making white people a minority. They think that black culture is really toxic and that black people need to figure out their shit and pick themselves up by their bootstraps and fix their own issues, right? They think and they think that, like, Muslims should probably be excluded from the United States. They think all of these things, but they're not racist. And it's like, okay, well, that's kind of weird, right? Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
But do you know how I see the word racist, sexist, homophobic, whatever?
Mm-hmm.
Every single person psychologically has prejudices, biases, whatever, and may well at some point in their life have made a joke that's technically, like by, I don't know, if you look at the actual terminology of what those words mean without them having any value judgment attached to them, they are sexist or they are racist. But there's a different, like, it's on a spectrum. So, like, if someone's always making racist jokes, then you can sort of say, okay, that person is probably a racist. But if they've done something sort of one-off somewhere, they probably are not. And they're not, do you know what I mean? Like,
this is a really common joke on my stream is, like, people, like, like I've told racist jokes before, and I probably still do every now and then, or sexist jokes. Like it's just my humor can be pretty edgy sometimes, but it's not the only type of joke I tell, and I'm pretty clear with most of my social views that I think that most people know where I stand on most of these types of issues. But I hear that a lot, where basically you've got these people, like if you go to Poll, right, the 4chan bowl, the 4chan Politics Bowl, or if you go to the Donald, right, it's very clear what types of ideas are leading here and what these people are thinking. But then people somehow like to pretend that, like, well, no, we're only joking here. And it's like, okay, well, every single joke about an Indian is like poo on the loo or shit in the beach. And every single joke about black people is how they should all be hung and how slavery should be brought back and they're low IQ thugs. And every single joke about Jewish people is like the Jewish question and the Jewish conspiracy. Like, it's pretty obvious that there's like a certain train of thought here. Like, you can call it just jokes, but all of your jokes are like this. It's probably for a reason, you know?
That's exactly my point. What I'm saying is it's to do with intent. So,
Yeah.
and seeing people around you and the context and the amount of it. Like, so you can be really pedantic with your friends or whatever and say, oh, you are being racist or whatever, and that pisses them off. But if you can see that there's sort of a culture going on where everybody's doing it, then there's a collective mindset which has an impact. So
Yeah.
it's a nuance in the whole situation. Sorry to use that word, but yeah, there is. Like, so I guess I can see both sides of it. Like, I can understand that you need to be able to make a joke without being labelled something. But on the other hand, collectively, if you see a lot of this stuff happening in a community, I think it's fair to say that there's something going on there. Like, there's some sort of collective bias.
Yeah, of course. Poll is racist as fuck, and the people on the Donald are most likely racist as fuck. Like, it's pretty fucking obvious. Like, you can call them just jokes all you want, but if all of your jokes involve like shitting on the same racial groups over and over and over and over again, and anytime somebody makes a joke about white people, you like start to flip shit. Like, it's pretty obvious like what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's why I love like your streams, because you can sort of balance both sides of that. Like, you can use your colloquial sort of language without, I don't know, but at the same time discouraging that kind of collective attitude. I don't know. I just think that's really good, because that's not really happening a lot.
And that's kind of the reason why I left the whole libertarian shit, is because, or not, I don't want to say that. The reason why I left the last line of thinking, I thought, is because I noticed that seemed to be the case. I was talking to a person earlier today about this, actually, that like, so I would say things like, so I would say things very commonly like, words shouldn't bother you. If somebody calls you a faggot or any type of racial slur, you shouldn't let something like that bother you. And I genuinely believe that. For me personally, that's true. I really do genuinely believe that. And I would get a lot of people commenting who would also believe that. And I thought that I had a lot of people that agreed with the same type of stuff that I agreed with, and that we were all kind of on the same page. But then I noticed that while all of these people seemed to say that they agreed with these things, that as soon as somebody made fun of white people, or as soon as somebody made fun of gamers, or as soon as somebody made fun of their group, well, now all of a sudden they were fucking flipping shit. And it's like, oh, well, I thought we all agreed that it was okay for people to laugh at themselves, and that we should be able to laugh at ourselves, and that it's not that big of a deal. But in reality, everybody's just a massive fucking hypocrite, and they were only saying it because it didn't impact them at the time, you know?
Yeah, and that's when I say when I say identity politics, I mean sides. I think it's happening on both sides. So I think that people are being hypersensitive on both sides, but at the same time, for me, it's about the intent. I can tell when somebody is deliberately using a slur to hurt another person, as opposed to doing it by mistake. I mean, obviously there are grey areas, but when you see a whole lot of people dogpiling another person and saying the same stuff, you can tell. Like, it's just common sense. Like,
Sure.
You know that's the agenda. And I don't know. So when I got called a name or something, I was like, I can tell that was taking me the wrong way. And I had a taste of what it's like to be on the right side of things. And I was thinking, okay, so maybe they have a bit of a point that if you're being really hyper pedantic about language to the point where people have to walk on eggshells every time they talk to you because they're so concerned about every word that they use, that's kind of, especially if they have the right, I don't know, they have the right attitude, that's a bit harsh. Like, especially on the internet, because everyone gets scrutinized for everything they say. And it's so easy to do a character assassination and just take words out of context and make some sort of, I don't know, like, if someone doesn't like what you have to say, it's quite easy to go through all your stuff.
Yeah, and find something wrong, yeah.
Yeah, and I just think that's kind of pointless. Like, if someone's got a history of being consistently caring towards human rights, or a comedian or something like that, I think that's...
Or Canadian?
Well, comedians tend to be on PC. Like, that's probably the only area where it's kind of funny. Like, and
wait, you really think Canadians in general are not PC?
Canadians?
Wait, you think that... Wait, what did you said? Canadians? You don't think?
Sorry, I said comedians.
Oh, comedians. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was getting really confused there for a second. Okay, I'm sorry. My bad. Keep going. You're right. I agree with you now. Okay, sorry. That was really weird.
Yeah, like, when it comes to stereotypes, one of the places where they're really fun is in comedy. Like, I can get that. But even then, I guess if there's too much of the same stereotypes, it can have an effect on young children and young people and stuff. But still, like, I can see why in comedy it's a good place to make generalizations. But apart from that, it just causes really divisive attitudes to other people. Like, even in relationships, interpersonal relationships, if you've got all these stereotypes in your head, you're going to project that onto the other person, and then that causes, you know, drama and all that shit. Like, that's why I personally care about stuff like on a local level as well as a global level. Like, it has a flow-on effect, basically, I guess. Like, and you were talking to Sargon about that, like the effect of culture on people, which is very hard to measure.
Yeah.
Like, nature as opposed to nurture. That's a complicated issue. Like, how do you measure that? You can't really... I mean, and when I heard that debate, I was like, how is he, like, not understanding what you're saying and then going back on it and saying, yes, I agree, culture has an effect on people.
Yeah, I think I had a big problem with that debate because he kept saying that, but I don't think he believed it, or I think we didn't mean the same thing by that. And I went over that debate pretty carefully and like went over and listened to a lot of it. And he did say that a few times, but then he would say things that made me feel like he didn't understand that. Like when he would ask me a question like, what's a law that keeps a woman from getting a job in engineering? Or what's a law that keeps a black person from getting married? Where it seemed like he was missing the point like pretty hard.
Yeah, and so it was basically a debate about the extent to which culture affects people's choices, which is very hard to measure. Like, how do you measure? How do you measure, like, why someone makes a certain choice? You can only look at that culture.
Yeah, and it's really hard, and you can't really survey it either because individuals won't even really know why you make the choices that you do. Like, it's pretty difficult to figure out.
Yeah, like, I was so frustrated by that because I saw the comment section and I was thinking, oh, wow, Stephen, I don't know whether you want to be called Steve or Stephen, but, like, I was watching it and thinking, wow, he did so well. And all those people...
No. The way that those comment sections work are, if anybody agreed with me, then they're going to come out saying that I absolutely annihilated the person, and if it's the other person's fans, then they're going to say that they absolutely annihilated me. That's how it goes in every single one of those comment sections. Holy shit.
Wow, I can't get my head around that. But yeah, I sincerely listened to both sides, and I was thinking, I completely relate to what you're saying. I guess the only thing that you can't know is the extent of it. Like, you just don't know that. Like, it's too difficult to figure out. So it's a bit like saying, oh, video games make people go out and shoot people. I mean, obviously they don't, but the culture that we live in does have some sort of impact on the way we perceive other people and the world. Like, there's no question about that. It's just, you know, like, too many of these people are like, oh no, you're your own person, you've made up your own mind. And that's just not true. Like, I completely disagree with that idea on principle. I just think that's not true. So I guess I wanted to ask you about that as well. Like, whether, like, I've never seen any studies on culture and the effect on other people, but I think that it does have a huge impact. There's no...
No, and this seems like we can look at like microcosms. This seems to be like just a level of education or familiarity, I guess, with the basic information. And if somebody disagrees with me, feel free to point it out. But like typically, what we find is that, or it seems from what I understand to be true, it seems that in psychology that we find that people have certain cognitive biases and that people will act predictably given certain scenarios. If you look at, I guess like the two big ones that are always talked about are the Milgram experiment and the Stanford prison experiment, right? In the Milgram experiment, a person is ordered to shock somebody up to 300 volts that they cannot see across a wall under the instruction of a professor. And what we find when we repeat this experiment over and over again is that people will go up to the maximum shock, even though the other person expresses extreme discomfort, like 70 to 80% of the time, an extreme amount, right? And this psychology experiment was kind of like a throwback to like the Nuremberg trials. Like how is it that Nazis were able to watch so many Jewish people being murdered and whatnot, right? And the kind of the hypothesis behind that, or the hypothesis, I guess some of the thoughts behind that are that if people are able to defer bad actions to figures of authority, then people will commit bad actions thinking that they're not personally responsible, right? And then the Stanford experiment is a little bit more controversial, but in that one, I think was that Zimbardo's experiment where he took, I think he took four or five normal dudes, he made them prison guards, and then watched like the type of behavior that they would exhibit. It would escalate more and more and more and more without any instruction at all. They would just really, really crazy things. We find that people in certain circumstances tend to act in very predictable ways, and that just seems to be the way of the world. And I've never heard of personally, and I've always invited people to link me these if these exist, but I don't think they do because I've never been linked one. But I don't see like these psychology experiments where like the professors do some experiment and all of the responders act in incredibly unique ways, and all of the responders act in ways that can't be predicted at all. Like it seems like people act generally in pretty predictable ways given their environment. So it seems pretty reasonable to extrapolate that to culture as well, right? That people will act in pretty particular or pretty predictable ways given their culture. I mean, like we all speak English in the United States. Well, most of us do, right? Why do you speak English, right? Why do you watch the TV shows that you watch? Why do you say the memes that you say? You know, not everybody is an original, sick meme spouter that can just invent the sickest memes off the top of their head. Most of them come from 4chan or from 9gag or from Reddit, right? Or from Facebook. This is culture, acting upon people.
Yeah, and also just in general, the idea that what other people say to other people, I mean, that a lot of people say sticks and stones may break your bones or whatever. I don't actually agree with that. I think it's great if some people can withstand what other people say, but if you've got relentless, verbal abuse, and especially as children, like if you have people saying stuff to you that has a detrimental effect, I don't think that it's true that doesn't have an impact on you. I mean, your parents and your family and your friends and all that, it does shape the way you feel about yourself to a certain extent. And obviously, the ideal is to be empowered enough in your own self to not let that get to you. But I think that it's a bit disingenuous to say that, it doesn't affect people at all. Of course words affect you. I mean, they do to a certain extent. And I guess we need to make a judgment about, how much of that makes someone acceptably upset. I don't know. It depends on the person, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, so this is something that I'm lucky. I learn best through personal experience. So it seems to be the only way that I can learn some things. But I'm lucky in that I had a lot of personal experience with this. I think that one thing that I've kind of figured out over my lifetime is I think that people are really bad. People are really bad at understanding time. Time is something that is just something that you just can't really just think about something happening over a long period of time and understand what it's really like. So if you talk to somebody about do you play video games at all, or
yeah.
Do you play video games online with voice chat?
Yeah, but I'm not a heavy hardcore gamer.
Sure. Okay.
But, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So So here's like an example, right? I've used this on stream a lot before. So like, people are really bad at understanding pressure over time. Anybody can understand a particular pressure felt in its immediacy at one point in time, but people don't understand how it affects you, how it impacts you over time. So for an example of this, I used to always say that I thought that women were being a little bit ridiculous when they would complain about people making sandwich jokes or whatever online. That I didn't really think that was that big of a deal. I've had people say way worse things to me. I just don't understand why sandwich jokes like should bother you that much. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And then I had a friend who I played a lot of CSGO with, and I played with there was like a 2 or 3 week period where we played like a lot of CSGO, and when we were queuing, what I found was that every single time we would get into a fucking game, somebody would make the same fucking sandwich joke every single time. And it got to the point where, like, when we got into a game, like, I was just waiting for her to open her mic and say her first word so that everybody could get their retarded jokes out of the way so that we could get on to, like, actually playing the game. And it was starting to, and it triggered me. Like, that's how fucking irritating it got. And I started to notice, like, from there, like, in looking at my experiences and how I would view things, I start to notice, like, okay, well, nothing is really irritating when it happens one time. Anybody can deal with something one time, right? Like the experiments where it's like, live like a poor person, spend only $100 on food for 1 month. Like, well, that's not too bad to do for a month, because you know that right after that you can go out to eating out every single day. Like, anybody can do it for a month. It's when you know you can only do it for the rest of your life that it becomes like a huge fucking issue, you know?
Yeah. Oh, like, I totally get your example. Like, I personally don't, like, I used to make a joke with my ex-boyfriend. I was like, tell me to make me a sandwich or whatever. Like, I thought it was funny, but your example is very accurate. And also, if you start, I think a lot of trolls try and find the weak point in another person they know is going to really hurt them, like whatever that may be. And with women, it tends to be their appearance or some, like, and they tend to be really sensitive. So if they've got like thousands of people saying you're an ugly whatever, I won't say it like out loud, but like if they say that to them over and over again and dox them and then call their family and like, or say you should die, if people say that to someone over and over again, it's going to have some sort of impact. Like, to deny that is a bit sort of dishonest, like it does. And I think the point of it in a lot of witch hunts, or for anybody, like male or female, is to silence people. And I think that that's a form of censorship in a way. Like, if you're getting all these like harassment calls and your family getting involved in all this shit, this stuff, like, it's not happened to me personally, but I think if that happens, I think a lot of people wouldn't cope with it, and they might stop doing what they might be wanting to be doing. Like, if they're a journalist, or if they're a public figure or a musician or something, it might actually work to shut them down. Like, it's a form of silencing someone. Okay? And I think that's what, I don't want to use names, but I think that's what a lot of YouTubers do. Like,
wait, like what? Well, what names? I'm familiar with a lot of people, so.
Like, Sargon. Like, I think that
oh, for sure. He loves Anita, dude.
Yeah, like, I think that he knows that his followers are going to do what he wants them to do. And I think that it's dishonest of him to not admit that. Like, because he knows that. Like, he knows that they're going to...
Yeah, maybe. I'd be a little careful. For honestly, like, just based on what I know on Sargon, I could believe that he might actually be so stupid that he doesn't realize that his fans will do it. But there are people that do know. Like Milo, Minneapolis, like, that dude knows. Like, when he went out of his way to bully that one transgender dude. Dude, I don't even remember. But, like, there are people that know. I don't know if I would group Sargon in there just because in how much I follow his shit now. I'm not sure if he would intentionally go out of his way to fuck with somebody, but maybe he just doesn't realize that that's what happens. Sargon's pretty special.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not trying to, like, target anyone in particular. I was just thinking of...
Oh, you can target people. I love targeting people, dude. Lauren Southern is a huge fucking piece of shit. I think that she would do it because she's a motherfucker. I think that Paul Joseph Watson, I think, would absolutely do it because he's a huge piece of shit. Naked Ape has done it before. He's a huge piece of shit. Yeah. Yeah,
I saw what he did to you, and I was like, wow, that's pretty obviously transparent. Like, wow, I can see that he's totally... this is what I mean about character assassinations on the internet. It's really terrible. I mean, I love the internet. I love the way that people can do what they want. But at the same time, so many people are using it to abuse people and cherry pick stuff and do these.
Yeah, the cherry picking is like a really bad thing that happens. It gets really ridiculous. That was the last Lawrence Southern video I watched, where people make it people make it sound like this is kind of the entire problem with like the right leaning people, is that they'll pick like these one or two examples from like Twitter or Tumblr, and they'll try to pretend that it's an example of everything. This kind of goes along with what you asked me earlier about like the college shit. Like there are a couple of colleges that are doing some really dumb things in the United States, but it's a very, very, very minor problem. And people would like Jordan Peterson would lead you to believe that like every single college campus is trying to like genocide fucking white people or something. Like people go really fucking crazy with it, and it's nowhere near as extreme as they make it out to be.
Jordan Peterson probably upsets me more than most of them because he's so smart and intellectual, in a position of power, a therapist, a psychologist.
Sure.
And I'm like
religion's a powerful thing, man.
Yeah, but like one of my friends is a psychologist, and she like there's a code of ethics. Like you're not meant to bring politics and religion into like therapy. Like it's really wrong. You're not meant to do that. And
Sure.
because he's so good with words and he's so charismatic, he's really manipulating a lot of people and young people who are vulnerable as well. Like I respect him. Like I think that he's very intelligent, but some of the messages he's sending to very vulnerable people is very concerning, and he's putting it all over the internet. And I'm like, this is not right. Like, he shouldn't be doing that. And then he's completely misinterpreted the law. Like, anyone who studied law will understand that it's just an extension of what's already there. Like, it's just another protected group. Like, if you want to argue with Bill C-16, you've got to argue with the whole Human Rights Law Tribunal, which, I mean, I could get on board with that because of the slippery slope thing, whatever. But he's sort of making out that it's this new thing that's going to cause all these lawsuits. And if you misgender someone, you're going to be put in jail, which is just not true. Like,
yeah, it's kind of, we had a similar law in the United States in New York City where people were making the same types of claims, where pretty much all the bill does is it brings basically gender discrimination or gender identity discrimination under the same types of protective class as other forms of discrimination, and it generally only applied to employers and like people that were renting apartments as well. But people tried to make it sound like that people were literally going to be like arresting you on the street if you accidentally misgender somebody or something like crazy like that.
Yeah, I'm guessing that, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I've read the law and I've read all forms of the arguments about the whole thing. It seems to me that it's basically like if you bash someone up, you'll go to jail. If you bash someone up because they're gay or because they're a man or because they're a woman or because they're trans or whatever, that adds to the sentence. Or in an institutional situation, if you're bullying someone intentionally because of their gender, race, sexuality, whatever, that is that's unacceptable. And I mean, the same with all human rights law. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's kind of taken it the wrong way. And as far as I can tell, I might be wrong, but because I've done a lot of reading on it, and it seems to me that had he not brought it up, there wouldn't be this huge...
well, people would still make a huge deal out of it because everybody is like making a huge deal about it. But yeah, he's probably one of the big figures behind it that's been giving it a lot of momentum, especially because of his educational background and everything. Yeah, he makes a lot of money on Patreon too. Holy shit! Doesn't he get like $20,000 a month or some shit?
I don't know. I'm not really subscribed to his Patreon, but I've noticed that he's just become this sort of almost like a god-like figure for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And like, if you listen to him about other topics, he's really intelligent, but I don't know. I'm sort of surprised that he's not more aware of his own biases. Like,
Well, he probably is. I mean, his arguments are fairly nuanced. It just seems like he comes at them from a certain angle. I'm not sure. I would have to go and listen to more of them. I don't want to write him off completely because I haven't dissected anything in depth. Just I've only sniped certain comments that he's made about certain things, but
I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I just think the way he's been misleading about that law concerns me, because he keeps saying, oh, it only affects a very small percentage of the population. And I'm like, well, yeah, it does. So why is this so big a deal? Why are you making a fuss out of it? Why do that?
Well, I think his argument is that it's a slippery slope and that pretty soon we're going to be, I don't know, whatever slippery slope shit makes, whatever happens next, that we're going to be going crazy on more laws. Isn't that generally his argument?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. But, I mean, do you agree with that?
Well, no, I mean, I don't, obviously, because I don't think that's what the law is about, but I think that's generally his argument. Or Ben Shapiro would make the same argument, probably.
Yeah. I've got to say, Ben Shapiro is very good at arguing, and it concerns me. He's...
But I think I like Ben Shapiro because I think that Ben Shapiro exposes a lot of ignorance on the left. I mean, I think that a lot of what Ben Shapiro says, I think, is pretty easily dismissible. But if you're not able to counter anything that he says, then I think that points to your problem as a liberal. For some of the people that debate him, I think Cenk was running into problems as well. I think that should be a challenge to the people that discuss things with him to be more educated on their points. A lot of what Ben Shapiro does seems to be echoing very, very Oh my god. Seems to be echoing very, very unnuanced, Econ 101 kind of sentiments, and then just leaving it there. And then the people that he's arguing with on the left don't even have the most basic understanding of econ, so they just kind of forfeit all of their arguments immediately.
Yeah, I love listening to Ben Shapiro, even though I disagree with everything he says. Not everything, actually, I agree with some of it, but on abortion and certain people's rights and stuff like that, I disagree with him, but he's very good at arguing a point. He's good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's not enough on the other side and that's why I love your streams. You're actually having a rational and calm, respectful debate with people. And I think that's really important. That's not happening enough on the other side, in my opinion. I just don't think it is. I mean, I don't know. Ben Shapiro talks so fast. I don't know how he's like a fact machine. He just comes out with all this stuff really quickly. I don't know. I have respect for him. I just don't, on principle, agree with a lot of stuff that he says. But I respect people who actually admit their agenda. So they're actually being honest about what they believe.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't do that. They just don't.
Yeah, for sure.
They pretend that they care about certain people, but they don't. It's a bit like when people talk about, I don't know, Islamic people being sexist or whatever, but then when women in the first world have issues, they don't believe it at all, because their agenda is to be Islamophobic rather than actually care about, do you know what I mean? It's a double step.
This is an issue that I got into Lauren Southern about, where Lauren Southern takes big issues with Islam because it disrespects women a lot. And she's really big on oh, well, in Islam, they're going to tell women to wear the hijab, and they want to tell women what they're allowed to wear and whatnot all the time. But then Lauren Southern will get on Twitter and make fun of Nicki Minaj and be like, well, Nicki Minaj wears all of these outfits. How can she possibly be mad if people objectify her when she dresses like a slut all the time? And it's okay, well, you're kind of saying the same thing that the Islam people are saying. I don't think you realize it, but yeah. Holy shit, that's really loud.
I'm sorry, I'm going to, make sure that it's off.
That's okay.
Yeah, Lauren Southern really scares me because she seems very sincere about what she's saying. Mm-hmm. That's what scares me about it.
Well, she's just standard evangelical, white conservative, blondie hippie girl, or blondie hipster girl. Or not hipster, I shouldn't say, but there's another word I'm looking for, but just standard evangelical conservative. I think she fits that bill very, very, very archetypically. Like if you find like an old religious white person and ask them what they think about any particular issue, that's what she's going to think about that particular issue.
Yeah, I don't know. I just see her comment sections, and everyone is just arguing about whether she's Jewish or not. And I'm like, doesn't she sort of read that and go, red flag here? Like, what does she really believe that white people are innately superior? Like, does she? I just find that so. I don't know. Maybe I'm sheltered, but I just can't get my head around that. Like that concept of thinking one race or skin color is, superior to other people. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that some of it could be a reaction to left-leaning people, like the fuck white people or whatever. I think that if you repeat that kind of sentiment enough, I think that it's understandable that people can come out feeling pretty. I think that extreme behavior usually creates extreme behavior on the other side. I think there's a little bit of truth to that.
So, would you say that you would equally condemn both extremes?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I hate extremist thought. I think it's really stupid. Extremist thought on both sides, I think, is a huge problem. I don't like it when anybody does it. But it's very hard to find people that consistently apply ideas and don't just play partisan bullshit politics. So like an example of this is I condemn violence for political reasons. I don't think violence for political reasons is ever good. And when I was talking about when that Richard Spencer guy got sucker punched in the face on the streets in the United States, I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think it should be celebrated. I don't think anybody should champion that. I don't think that should ever be the type of behavior that we advocate. That's not how politics is supposed to work in the United States. And a lot of people on the left, we're very happy to see him get punched, and we're making jokes about it, and we're very jovial about it. And a lot of people on the right were very upset and echoed my sentiments. And I think Sargon retweeted me. I got a bunch of people that were agreeing, like, wow, thanks. Like, this is a really good thing. I'm glad you're saying this. But then as soon as that one Antifa girl got sucker punched in the face, all of a sudden both sides swapped their opinions immediately. Like, everybody on the right was laughing and making videos about how funny it was that she got punched and found twice. And everybody on the left was all of a sudden abhorred by political violence, even though she was probably there throwing bottles at people. Right, so like everybody just seems to be like a giant fucking hypocrite.
Yeah, I saw that you said that on, I think it was with Maddox.
Oh yeah, with Maddox, yeah.
Yeah, because I really loved that vlog, and I was like, yeah, that is so true. The hypocrisy is just insane. Like, you either agree with violence or you disagree with it. Like, you can't take one side or the other depending on who you care about.
Yeah, this weird like moral relativism where it's okay when your side does it, but not. Yeah, it's really, really, really stupid, really intellectually dishonest, and really disgusting. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you deal with the whole Sargon thing? Like, were you happy with that debate, or?
I don't know. I mean, I think I could have kept my calm a little bit better. I always get a little too heated when I talk to Sargon, which I think makes my point appear weaker. So my biggest problem, I try to take something from every debate I do. My biggest problem with Sargon was that I wouldn't nail him down on a point. I would let him change the topic too much on me, and then the conversation would become very scattered instead of focusing it around a very central point and focusing it around very central ideas. Oftentimes when I debate people now, I usually have a notepad running and I'll take notes when they're talking so that I can keep things more focused.
Yeah, that's why I wrote down stuff, and I feel kind of, I don't know. I didn't actually read anything that I was actually going to ask you, but the other thing was, the last thing I wanted to ask you was about I think his name is Martin Shkreli.
Martin Shkreli, yeah. I talked with him before. What about him?
Shkreli. How did, because I've seen him talk to a lot of people, and he's normally trolling them, but you managed to sort of not disarm him, but you kind of were friendly with him, and he actually spoke to you like a person. Like, he was lot more.
I think so to not jerk myself off too much or too hard on stream, because I don't want to get banned for pornography. I think I consider myself a fairly intelligent person, and I think that in the if you listen to the beginning of our conversation, he was definitely trolling me. Like, pretty hardcore. It was pretty obvious. But I think that once he realized that I wasn't a total idiot, I think he was more willing to have like a jovial conversation. if that makes sense. He probably talks to a lot of people that are really dumb, and he just wants to troll them the entire time, but I don't think he thought that I was a total idiot, so he didn't mind opening up a little bit more, would be my guess if I had to.
So what did you sort of take from that? Like, how do you perceive him and his sort of agenda?
I mean, and I don't know. We probably would disagree about a lot of stuff on pretty much everything, but we didn't really talk about much. I guess we just kind of like talked about random topics or whatever. But I would probably disagree with him about a fair bit of stuff. I've heard him talk about different concepts before, where I thought he had a really ridiculous opinion, but I don't know if I'll ever get a chance to talk to him about any of them.
I found it really fascinating, to be honest, because I don't know, I just find people who are like that interesting to understand. Like, I found it, I don't know, it just seemed like both of you had completely different goals and ideas about things, and yeah, like, I don't know. I'd only heard about him like a year ago, so I had no idea exactly the extent to which he was doing something wrong. So
yeah, and I don't even know to the extent. I don't even know at this point how much he was doing wrong, or if he was doing anything wrong. That shit is way too complicated. I don't understand enough to really know about any of it. Some people are mad because he raised the cost of a certain drug to very high levels, but he claimed that even though he raised the cost of that drug, that nobody was actually impacted by it, that the insurance companies were absorbing the costs, and that if anybody couldn't afford it, he would make it freely available to them, and that he was funneling the money into R&D. Other people counter by saying that even though he does that, the insurance companies themselves are going to pass that cost ultimately onto the consumer. And then his counter argument to that was, while that might be true, drug companies have to raise money for R&D to develop better pharmaceuticals that are more effective anyways. It's all way too complicated for me. I don't know where the truth is in that. I don't know enough about the inner workings of our pharmaceutical system to have a good argument or understanding of it.
Yeah, well, that's why what you do is good, because you can actually say, okay, I don't know this, I'm going to ask. Like, too many people don't do that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Everyone just jumps on a bandwagon, and I just find it really dichotomous that you've got to take one side or the other.
Yeah.
And I just think, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really bad thing. There are a lot of people that do that, yeah.
I don't know what's happening in America. I can imagine it's a lot worse there. But in Australia, even where I am, you don't want to talk politics, because people will just put you in a category and decide without talking to you about it. And so, that's why I wanted to talk to you, because I was thinking everything has become so divided that nobody can sort of talk to each other and try and understand. It's like you're in this one category and that's it.
Yeah, that's a really big problem. People are hardcore divided in terms of their beliefs. That's actually one of my stated goals. I think I have two stated goals for why I do these debates, and one of them is that I just want people to be having conversations about topics that are meaningful without them being absurd. So like insofar as like immigration, like a good conversation is like, how much immigration is appropriate for the United States and what are the pros and cons of it? Like, that's probably a good conversation to have. The conversation of like, are all the people that come to the United States Mexican rapists and murderers? That's probably not a very productive conversation. Like, typically I just want people's conversations to be rooted in kind of reality and to be productive, I guess, or like the discourse to be like a productive discourse.
Yeah, the discourse should be, how many immigrants and refugees should we take in? Not, we can't take any. Or we should take them.
Yeah.
Like, that's so black and white thinking.
Yeah.
I don't know. And that's what I've noticed.
Yeah, or like the immigration stuff going on in a lot of Europe, where people are like, oh, well, like Muslims are bad. We can't have any Muslims, like they all need to go. Like we need to get rid of all of them. Like fuck Muslims. Like, okay, well that's not very realistic. Like how about let's find, first of all, are there big problems with certain Muslim communities? Like if there are, what can we do to remedy those problems? Have we tried remedying those problems? What's worked? What hasn't worked? Have we actually made good effort to integrate these communities, right? And then like once you move through these, then you can find, like other things. But like your first solution can't be the final solution. Like we can't just deport like every single person that's too brown for you to live around. Like that's not a reasonable solution to any of these problems.
Yeah, well, I went to a school that like I didn't have any issues with. I didn't notice any racism. I had Indian, Asian, all sorts of kids that were there. So that's why I was a bit shocked when I came out of high school because maybe my school was unusual or something, but I didn't understand. Like, the thing is, when you hang out with people for a long time, they become less dehumanized. You just see them as people. You don't see them as gay, straight, black, white, whatever. Like, you just don't see them that way. You see them as a human being. And that is probably the key to actually integration. And so I guess I was thinking, I don't know, like, if you have people who are trying to stay away from the rest of the community, that's a bad thing. And a lot of this comes down to how you actually successfully integrate with other cultures. Like, and that is a structural thing. Like, it's not just about, oh, all these people are bad and all these people are good or whatever. Like, sure. It's not, yeah. So I don't really understand how that should work. But for me personally, when I was at high school, maybe I was lucky, but that wasn't an issue for me. Like, I just saw people as people, you know?
Yeah, and I think the more you hang around certain people, there's a really famous guy I should actually read the story so that I can recite this better, but there was supposed to be a really famous dude that went around. It was a black dude, and what he would do is he would make fun, or not make fun, he would make friends with people that were in the Ku Klux Klan. Do you know what that is?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, really, yeah. He would go around and he would befriend these people, and eventually he would convince them to leave the Ku Klux Klan. Ku Klux Klan. He would eventually convince them to leave after showing them that not all black people are fucking horrible people, you know? Yeah, there's a lot of, the more you get to, talk to some people. That's probably why in the United States, to some extent, the big, like a huge divide that you see in the U.S. that we didn't realize really until this election, I guess, is that there's a really big divide between city people and rural people in the United States. It's probably like this for a lot of countries. Actually, I think it was, because I think it was like this for France as well. But that divide is actually monumental, that rural people all tend to believe certain things and city people tend to believe certain things. And these certain things are very, very, very different from one another.
Yeah. So when you say rural people, do you mean like in the South in America or the mid?
No, in low population density areas. It's actually not even just the South, because even in the South, right? Are you familiar with do you know Texas?
Yeah.
Right. So like when you think of redneck, the good South, the South and all that, and like the epitome of like Southern thinking, like a lot of people think of like, oh well, Texas. But if you go to Texas, if you go to cities like Houston or Dallas or Austin, these cities are very like heavily multicultural. There's lots of diversity of skin color, and there's a lot of fucking liberals in these places. These cities are very blue cities. Like if you go to like Austin or if you go to like College Station or whatever, you go to some of these cities with like these schools and shit, you're not going to find a lot of like super redneck open carry conservatives in fucking Austin, Dallas, Houston. Like, you're going to find a lot of liberals, a lot of Democrats in these places. But that's just because they're big cities and there's a lot of people that live in, close density with one another. There's a lot of minority types, colored people and whatnot that live in these places, It's just the really low population density areas that seem to be very homogenous, very white, that have these certain particular types of thoughts,
Yeah. And do you think that that's mainly motivated by religion, or is it like a general fear of an other or something like that?
I mean, a lot of it is just life experience. I mean, if you've lived around white people your entire life, and the only exposure you have to black people is in rap music and in movies, and the only exposure you have to Mexicans are to the scary stories that you hear on the radio from Rush Limbaugh and Michael Savage and Glenn Beck about how Mexicans are coming to take your jobs and rape all your women and shit, or you're listening to Donald Trump, then I mean, it's pretty understandable that you would have these thoughts about these types of people if you don't have any real world experience to say otherwise.
Yeah, well, all of us make snap judgments. The minute we see another person, we unconsciously make a snap judgment. It's a primitive sort of defense mechanism. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. By pointing that out, it doesn't make you a bad person, but by recognizing that you have these biases.
Yeah, and that goes into what I was saying earlier, that like we do have these psychological biases that a lot of people don't recognize. One of humans' greatest tools in the wilderness is our ability to recognize patterns very quickly and apply those patterns in ways that make sense, like cognitively, to interpret the world. That's like a really powerful human. That's a very human thing. Like, that's something that we do exceedingly well, and it was important for our survival. But today it works against us a lot. Like making assumptions very quickly about people. or trying to fill in the blanks or painting really, big stories with only limited information is something that is really bad for us to do today. But we do it because of evolutionary reasons,
Absolutely, yeah. That's pretty much my whole, thing. And when people say, oh, don't call me sexist, don't call me racist or whatever, I get why they're saying that, but I feel like a lot of people don't, I don't mean to be patronizing, but I feel like they don't understand that psychologically all of us do that, and it's just the extent to which we do it that we get judged upon. It's having an awareness of that and not letting it completely divide us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Those words are just adjectives, they're descriptive words to explain primitive biases that people have, basically. Everyone has them, but it's the extent to which they affect their lives and their relationships with other people, whether they're friends or boyfriends or girlfriends or whatever. It's just, you've got to be aware of that, because it's sort of sad, that people want to divide themselves from people who could be really good friends or, it's sad. You don't need to do that and assume the worst of people based on ingrained ideas about stereotypes and all that stuff. That's pretty much my take on the whole thing, because unless you're in a jungle and you encounter something that you don't know what it is and you've got to be really careful. We're not in tribes anymore. We're in the modern world, so you don't, unless you're in an alleyway or something like that and you don't know who you should trust, it's not the way to interact with people, I guess. It's sort of sad. I don't know. That's just my take. I don't know why people are so hell-bent on putting people in categories, and yeah.
Yeah.
And that applies to everybody. I'm guilty of it as well. Everybody has biases.
For sure, yeah.
And it's human nature. But the sad thing is, when they become collective and it affects huge populations of people, that's when there's a huge oppression that happens, because the government gets involved and policy changes and all this stuff that happens. It's not like when the Holocaust happened, overnight all these German people just decided, let's put all these Jewish people in gulags. It's not like they all turned overnight. It happened over a period of time, which is why it's really important to understand history and how these things happen.
Yeah, a lot of people. I try not to draw comparisons to Hitler because it seems like that triggers the fuck out of a lot of people with Trump. But yeah, no, I know what you mean. Everything is a process.
Oh, it's the same with communism as well. It's not one side of politics. It's just the way people operate. When a whole lot of people start believing the same thing, they might have an impact on the politicians, which then has an impact on certain marginalised groups, and it has a flow-on effect, basically. It doesn't matter what side of politics you're on, really.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I'm not saying, all these Trump supporters are Nazis or anything. I know they're not. That's why I'm interested in this whole topic. That's why I find it fascinating, because I'm like, well, why would all these people not see what's going on? But yeah, it's sort of sad because everyone's so divided, and most, your everyman, the most people just want the same things. They want to protect their family, they want to have food and shelter, healthcare, all that stuff. They care about their neighbours, their friends, whatever. It's the same thing.
Yeah, in general, yeah, I would say so. Most people have the same basic things, yeah. Just different ways of going about them, apparently.
Yeah. So, anyway, thank you for talking to me.
Yeah, no problem. If you ever have any other questions or anything, feel free to let me know. Did you have any final thoughts or anything?
No, that's fine. But thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks. I kind of have a running joke on my stream that most of the Australians that I talk to are fucking crazy. So thanks for not doing that. I don't know if it's a thing in your country or not, but a lot of the usually if I get an Australian that wants to talk politics here, usually they're one of the race realist guys. They want to talk about like Aboriginals or something. So
I'm really sort of sad because a lot of YouTube channels from Australia that are famous are really, I don't know, racist.
yeah, yeah, that's one way to say it.
I'm like, I'm really ashamed of that. I wish there were more Australian YouTubers that were doing more for social justice and human rights for all people, not just one group of people, all people.
Sure.
You know? Yeah.
All right.
Anyway,
thanks for the conversation, buddy.
You too. Thank you.
Yeah, have a good one.
All right. Bye.
See ya.